Okay, welcome to the Good Hormone Health webinar on December 27, 2020. Today's talk is a very timely and popular one entitled COVID-19 Vaccines for Endocrine Patients. And all participants should be muted. If you are unmuted, then please mute your phone. And let's try to keep it nice and quiet. We'll have time at the end via the chat for questions. The topics we'll discuss tonight is how do the COVID vaccines work? What did the New England Journal of Medicine article say about the COVID vaccine, about the Pfizer COVID vaccine? What are the different vaccine options? What are the side effects? Who should and shouldn't get a vaccine? What about Dr. Friedman's vaccine studies? And some time for questions and answers. Now, as people know, I'm Jewish. We celebrate Hanukkah. And I think it's quite significant and interesting that the FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine on the first day of Hanukkah, December 11, 2020, on a Friday. The FDA approved the Moderna vaccine on the 8th day of Hanukkah, December 18, 2020. And I received my Pfizer vaccine on the 8th day of Hanukkah, December 18, 2020. And I'd like to show this video, and I need to change how we share it.
Of the over 50,000 Jews who lived in Saloniki, Greece, on the eve of the Holocaust, only a few thousand survived, including Dr. Albert Bourla's parents. 75 years after the Nazis murdered millions, Dr. Bourla is today leading the race to save millions. He is the CEO of the Pfizer Corporation, which has developed the world's first COVID-19 vaccine. In the months ahead, hundreds of millions of doses of the vaccine will be distributed to countries throughout the world, including who inhabit our world, that there is light at the end. Only a few thousand survive, including Dr. Albert Bourla's parents. 75 years after the Nazis murdered to save millions. He is the CEO of the Pfizer Corporation, which has developed the world's first COVID-19 Under his leadership, Pfizer has shown the more than 7 billion people who inhabit our world that there is light at the end of what has been a very dark tunnel. That is why we are honored to have Albert, the proud son of Holocaust survivors, light the seventh candle.
Shalom, everyone. I want to thank Ambassador Dermer for inviting me to virtually light the Israeli embassy's candle for the seventh night of Hanukkah. For me, it is a great honor. Hanukkah is the story of two things. First, it is a story of grit and determination in the face of great adversity.
Okay, can people hear me now? No. Okay, good. How about now? Can people hear me? Okay, good. Sorry about that. Okay, so the COVID vaccine works by injecting mRNA, which codes for the spike protein. The mRNA is injected into the muscle, and the vaccine triggers production of the spike protein, and it goes from RNA to the protein, and that makes antibodies specific for this. This happens in the deltoid of the muscle of the arm. And these antibodies then mediate different immune responses, including a T cell response. Can people hear me? Okay, good. Okay. And this antibody response prevents the virus from multiplying. If you get infected later, it will prevent the virus from infecting you. I want to talk about different phases of clinical trials. Phase 1 is in animals. Phase 2 is small trials with a few number of patients. And phase 3 are large trials with a lot of patients. The studies that we're talking about today with the COVID vaccine were all vaccine versus placebo. Half the people got the vaccine, half the people got placebo. And as we know, Operation Warp Speed was sponsored by President Trump and the Trump administration to provide funding for phase 3 vaccine trials that started in the summer of 2020 and continued into the fall. Pfizer did not accept government funding for this. Pfizer is one of the main vaccines. Other companies did. And then in the Operation Warp Speed, and over the summer, there was about 68 different companies that had trials of the vaccine. The novel thing about Operation Warp Speed and what happened with the COVID vaccine is there wasn't a necessity of waiting for the results of animal studies. Animal studies were done and published, but the companies started doing the clinical studies even before the vaccine studies, the clinical trials, and the companies started manufacturing the vaccine even before the studies were out. So this was a little bit of a risk that there could potential the vaccines couldn't work, but the companies still started manufacturing them, and that's why when the FDA approved these two vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer one, they were able to ship it out within days or hours after you got approval, and people were able to get it right away. Now it's important that the trials will continue for 2 more years, and these again are the Pfizer and the Moderna trial and the other ones. And this will see, it's very important to do this. This will see if the immunity persists. It's possible that people will have immunity in the beginning, they'll lose their immunity, and it's possible they'll continue their immunity. So allowing the trial to continue will allow to answer that question, and it will also allow to examine long-term safety. Right now, the studies have looked at safety that is fairly short-term, but we'll see whether it happens long-term or not. And I think that's why it's important to the studies. Now, people that are in the trials that are getting the placebo, they can switch over to the vaccine. I think it would be unethical for people to continue to get the placebo now that the vaccine's out. And this is a slide that we got when Charles Drew University was looking at being in the study. This is what was about in July or so. And this showed the different companies that were trying it. At this time, there was the Moderna trial. There were some basic science ones, the AstraZeneca one, the Janssen one, which is also by Johnson & Johnson. the Sanofi one, and then also in there that wasn't listed here, but is one called Novavax. And the key things were the Moderna one, the Pfizer one, which is not listed in here. Those are the two that finished and got approved. So 2 vaccines completed their initial part of the trial. I mean, again, the trials are ongoing, and they got FDA approval as of December 20th, 2020. The Pfizer one enrolled 43,448 subjects, and the Moderna one enrolled 30,000 subjects. Both are RNA vaccines that codes for the protein, and you cannot get the COVID virus from these vaccines. It doesn't code for the full length virus. It only has a portion of it. It's an RNA. It's not the virus itself. It's not the virus itself. And the RNA gets degraded in a couple of days. So it's impossible to get COVID from these vaccines. This is a slide that shows the different vaccines. The AstraZeneca one, also by Oxford, is still being studied. The Moderna one got FDA approval. The Pfizer one got FDA approval. These are RNA vaccines. The Oxford one is a viral vector. And I don't know much about the Russian one called Sputnik 5. It's a viral one. I'm not sure it was published, but it is already being used. And I think in China, they're also using a vaccine that really wasn't published much. But we're going to concentrate on the United States ones. These, as far as I know, these were in the pipeline of trials and are not FDA approved. The AstraZeneca one, which is also by Oxford. The Johnson & Johnson one, which is also produced by Janssen, and the Merck one. And I think somebody says if you're having trouble, you can log off and log back on again with the sound. It should be working by now. What's the ingredients in the vaccine? So the Pfizer vaccine contains the mRNA, the codes for the viral spike protein, glycoprotein. It contains lipids or fatty substances, including these ones here that sort of stabilize it. It contains potassium chloride, monobasic potassium phosphate, sodium chloride of salt, dibasic sodium phosphate dihydrate, sucrose, which is sugar. Most importantly, as far as I know, it does not contain any preservatives, and that's why it needs to be kept cold. But the plus is some of the prior vaccines that were given to our country did have preservatives, and that caused some kind of controversy about whether the preservatives are problematic or not. But the new vaccines, the COVID vaccines, do not have preservatives. So I'm going to concentrate on talking about this New England Journal article here. The New England Journal article came out about 3 weeks ago. And New England Journal, as people know, is really considered the top line journal publications. And it summarizes a little bit here. The title is Safety and Efficacy of the BNT 1628B2 mRNA COVID vaccine. And it looked at 43,548 participants greater than 16 years or older. And they were assigned to receive either the vaccine or the placebo by intramuscular injection on days 0 and days 21. Participants were followed for safety and the development of symptoms of COVID infection for a median of 2 months. So the START trial is fairly short term, but there was a lot of people in it. They looked at safety, and the main results were that the vaccine recipients had local reactions, pain, swelling, redness, and some systemic reactions, fever, headache, muscle pain, aches, myalgias, at higher rate than placebo recipients, with more reactions following the second dose. Most were mild to moderate and resolved rapidly. The vaccine showed early protection 12 days after the first dose, and by 7 days after the second dose, it was 95% effective. And we'll talk about this later. Limitations include, and you need further studies to look at what's going to happen 2 months after the study, and groups not included in the study, children, pregnant women, and immunocompromised persons. Whether the vaccine protects against asymptomatic infection and transmission to unvaccinated people. My guess is, and I think almost everybody thinks that it will, that if you don't get the COVID, you're not going to infect it, but it is possible that people could have asymptomatic infections and still be able to spread it. And what happens if people miss the second dose, so it's not addressed. The conclusion is that the 2 doses of the vaccine were safe over a median of 2 months and provided 95% protection against symptomatic COVID infections in persons 16 years of age or older. So in terms of efficacy, the primary endpoint was efficacy against the COVID-19. And you had to have 2 things. You had to have symptoms and a positive COVID test by PCR. So people that were not symptomatic didn't count as positive, and people didn't have the positive test. You had to have both of these. It didn't look at patients with symptoms and negative tests, or with patients with a positive test without symptoms. Again, you had to have both things, symptoms and a positive COVID test. And they're going to look at infectivity, such as having the COVID-19 in the respiratory, in someone's respiratory culture in future studies. They're also going to look at antibody levels in future studies. This paper here in New England Journal did not look at antibody levels. And this is a very important point showing the degree, the number of infections here. So this is the placebo. This is the incidence of infection. You can see it went up with each time. This is the days after the first dose. And you can see that the participants that got the vaccine, they got a few infections in the beginning, but it leveled off here, so very few people got infections. And sort of the point where the graph started differentiating is 12 days. So it's thought that at 12 days, the vaccine starts becoming effective, but certainly after the second dose, which is 21 days, a couple of days after that, it started getting more and more effective. So in terms of effectiveness, the vaccine was 95% effective in preventing COVID-19. 8 of the 18,000 some odd study patients who received the vaccine developed the COVID, compared to 162 of the 18,000 patients who got the placebo. The cases among the placebo and the vaccine recipients started to divide by 12 days, indicating that some immunity starts early. And just to contrast this with the Moderna vaccine, which is not part of this New England Journal study, but I like to put it up there in comparison. The Moderna vaccine was 94.5% effective, so very similar. 5 patients of the 13,000 some odd patients who received the vaccine developed COVID, compared to 90 of the 13,000 who received the placebo. This is the study here. We can look at the top graph here. There was 8 patients, as I mentioned before, that got the vaccine that got COVID at least 7 days after the second dose, while there was 162 patients that got the placebo got it. The confidence vaccine effectiveness is 95%, and it's extremely statistically significant. Now, this one here looks at some of the endpoint outcomes. I won't go over this too much. I'll go over it in the next coming slides. But basically, the study was effective in all groups, ages 16 to 55, greater than 55, greater than 65, greater than 75. Males and females were fairly effective, similarly effective. Whites, Black or African American subjects, Hispanics, others, all these did quite well, and similarly to Caucasians. So it was effective in all races. And the study was done in several countries of, Brazil, Argentina, and the United States. And the amount of cases were pretty similar in terms of percentage in the different countries. So were the vaccines effective in older people? The Moderna vaccine was 100% effective in people 65 or older. It was 93.4% effective in people between the ages 18 to 64. And the Pfizer vaccine was 93% effective in people 56 or older, and 95.6% effective in the younger people between 16 and 55. Did the vaccine work in people with pre-existing medical conditions? The Moderna vaccine was 95.9% effective in patients with chronic lung disease, chronic significant cardiac disease, diabetes, liver disease, HIV, and severe obesity. And for people without these conditions, it was 94% effective, so very similar, maybe even a little bit better than people with conditions. The Pfizer vaccine was 95.3% effective in people with a wide range of health issues, and 94% effective in people without them. Did it help people of color? The Pfizer vaccine was 100% effective for Black study participants and 94.5% effective for Latino participants, slightly below the 94.7% effectiveness for white subjects. It was a 74.4% effective in Asian Americans, 100% effective in Native Americans and Pacific Islanders, and very few of these patients got the infections, so it was a little hard to tell, but basically it was very effective. The Moderna vaccine was 100% effective in Black, Latino, and Asian Americans, as well as people with mixed racial backgrounds. So it definitely works in people regardless of their race and ethnicity. Did the vaccine work equally well in men and women? And the answer is yes to that. The Moderna vaccine was 95.5% effective in men and 93.5% effective In women, the Pfizer vaccine was 95.3% effective in men and 93.9% effective in women. Did the vaccines prevent severe cases of COVID-19? The Moderna vaccine was 100% effective in preventing severe cases. 11 people in the trial developed severe disease. All of them were in the group that had received placebo. 3 of the patients were sick enough to go to the hospital. The Pfizer vaccine was 66.4% effective at preventing severe cases of COVID. Of the 4 study participants who developed severe illness after receiving 2 shots, 1 got the vaccine, so it wasn't perfect. There was 1 patient out of 30,000 or 43,000 patients that did get severe COVID. From what I heard, the person just sort of barely met the criteria for severe COVID and recovered quickly. And 3 of them got the placebo. 2 of those in the placebo group were hospitalized, including 1 that was admitted to an intensive care unit. Now, an important difference is the Pfizer vaccine needs to be stored about minus 95 degrees Celsius, about 50 degrees colder than any vaccine currently used in the United States. The vaccine can be kept in a refrigerator for only 5 days before it expires. And this will be a problem if you're delivering to a rural area that doesn't have these type of freezers. While the Moderna vaccine can be kept at minus 20 degrees Celsius, about the temperature of a home freezer, and it can be kept in the refrigerator for 30 days. The Moderna vaccine is administered at 2 doses, 28 days apart. The Pfizer vaccine is administered at 2 doses given 21 days apart. The Moderna vaccine would be used in patients 18 or older. The Pfizer vaccine is authorized for use in patients 16 and older currently. Okay, so adverse events. I think it's very important to realize that if you take 100,000 people over a period of time, a certain number of them will get a heart attack, a certain number will get a stroke, a certain number will get pneumonias with and without the vaccine. So the most common adverse reactions to the vaccine have been injection site pain, fatigue, headache, muscle pain, joint pains, chills, and swollen lymph nodes have been reported. The short-term pain at the injection site was common with both vaccines. Roughly 90% of those with the Moderna vaccine reported such pain after 2 doses, as well as 80% of those who got the Pfizer vaccine. In both trials, injection pain was far less common for people who received the placebo. It seems like the pain is a little more common after the second injection. I just received 1 injection and I had no pain at all and did perfectly fine that day. So this is a table from the New England Journal article. I highlight a couple points in red. Serious adverse events in the vaccine, it was 0.6%, and the placebo 0.5%, not statistically different. Life-threatening adverse events, it was 3 in the vaccine group and 6 in the placebo group. So it's actually more common in the placebo group. And similarly, death was 2 in the vaccine group, 4 in the placebo group. This is pretty low numbers, but it was more common to have death in the placebo group. Now, allergies sort of came up after the studies were out, especially in people in the United Kingdom, and I think also some people in Alaska had some allergies. As far as the last I heard, there were 6 people out of the 272,000 doses that had an allergic reaction. They all occurred within a 30-minute window and all were treatable, and it's recommended that people get the vaccine, don't go off to their next place within 30 minutes after the injection to make sure you don't get an allergic reaction. Okay, so now the question everybody's wondering, should patients with endocrine disorders get the vaccine? The answer is yes. And I recommend really everybody, based on this New England Journal article, that everybody should get the vaccine. Endocrine patients in general are more susceptible to getting a severe infection from COVID-19. I talked about that in a webinar in I think it was April or May. And so that they should definitely get it. And I really see no reason to put it off. Some people said they don't want to be the first one. They don't want to be a guinea pig. Right now, there's been over 100,000 people that have gotten the vaccine. The 2 studies used a large number of people, and I think they're well-designed studies. So I see no reason to put it off now that the trials have come out. I think when people are ready to get it, when it's your turn, people should get it. Do I need the vaccine if I was already infected? And I think people are recommending yes. Partially because some people who've been infected get a second infection. We've seen that. It's not that common, but it is. And it's most likely that the immunity is likely to be much stronger with the vaccine than with exposure to the virus itself. So the vaccine is most likely to be stronger than the immunity is stronger. So it's recommended that people still get the vaccine if they were infected before. Now, we've heard a lot about this new strain of COVID-19 from the United Kingdom. Will the virus work against it? I think it will. Most people, experts, including Dr. Fauci, say it will. The antibodies are made against this whole spike protein. The spike protein sort of sticks out and has a lot of sites of antigenicity where the antibodies can attack it. The mutated virus still has most of the spike protein intact, so most likely the antibodies are going to attack the new strain as well as the older strain. And even if there's new strains that come out, most likely the antibodies will work against them. Who should not get the COVID vaccine? Potentially somebody that had a reaction to the first dose. So if you had a reaction to the first dose, you're one of those 6 people, or you had a pretty severe reaction, you might want to not get the second one. It's very rare. And if somebody had a reaction to another vaccine, say the flu vaccine, I don't think that's a contraindication to getting this. This is a completely different type of vaccine. So I think you can go ahead and get this, and we'll answer the questions later, the question and answer time. We'll get to them shortly. And people that have the allergies, somebody that has an allergic reaction, like for example, I have some patients that are allergic to gadolinium, and they get pre-treatment before they get their gadolinium for their MRI. I think it'll be reasonable to get the same pre-treatment you get for your gadolinium as you do for your vaccine. So they often get a Medrol pack and antihistamine pre-treatment. You should discuss it with your primary doctor, but I think that would be a reasonable choice to do that. Okay, a lot of people are going to ask the question, why should I take the COVID-19 vaccine when I usually don't take vaccines? So vaccines are definitely, a controversial topic that has pluses and minuses about them. I'm not going to go into that. As you can see, I'm basing my study on data on the New England Journal article. But I would say if you want to make a comparison to other vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccine has been much more studied than other vaccines. But we have very solid data with the New England Journal and the data on the Moderna. COVID-19 can be more serious than getting the flu or the measles. I think we want to, really just want to make sure that people don't get sick with it. A lot of people are dying from it, basically. And I think it's also sort of part of a global or national help. You get the vaccine, you'll help wipe out the virus and end the pandemic. So this is quite different from the flu vaccine. It also seems much more effective. The flu vaccine, depending on the year, sort of varies between about 25% to about 65% effectiveness. This is 95% effective. This is not a money maker for big pharma. The pharmaceutical companies are not getting, really money on this, as far as I know. And there's no preservatives in them. So a lot of people, again, have complained, worried about the regular vaccines having preservatives. This does not have preservatives in them. Will I still need to wear a mask? I'd say probably. And I think it depends on what happens with the ongoing vaccine trials. Is the levels of antibodies start declining, or are they going to stay strong? And I think it also depends on, sort of what happens with the rest of the country. If everybody starts getting the vaccine, the virus starts being eliminated, you could stop wearing your mask. But I think in the short term, I think people should be wearing a mask and should be practicing social distancing. If the studies have shown that the titers start decreasing with time, people may need to get a third vaccine shot. I think right now, booster vaccine, I think right now people are fairly confident that the two shots are going to work. Okay, then this concept about herd immunity. Dr. Fauci, the herd immunity says enough people will have the vaccine and the virus will die out. Dr. Fauci estimates that 85 to 90% of the country needs to get vaccinated. And my opinion, and I think following Dr. Fauci and other experts, it's really important for the Americans to get the vaccine probably before the next fall. I think we realized, at least this year, the infections were lower in the summer and higher as the fall and the winter came, people inside more. I think it would be really good to have everybody get the vaccine before the next fall starts. And then it's possible, again, with more time antibodies levels may drop. So I think we want to do it when, it's sort of a big push. As soon as people can get it, they should get it. And I believe certainly in freedom of Americans to choose to get it or not get a vaccine. I think ending the pandemic will occur only if most people get the vaccine. Rollout of vaccines. So there are other vaccines in the pipeline, as I mentioned. My guess is the government is going to push for increased production of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and these are going to be the only two vaccines that are going to be used. Concerned that there's not enough of ability to manufacture these two vaccines. My guess is that the government's going to push to have more of these made and distributed, so the amount will be higher. And I think that's a better use of government money than to sponsor other studies for other companies. And my guess is most Americans will want to be vaccinated, and will be vaccinated in this sort of spring, summer 2021, as the vaccine has been found to be safe and effective. My hope and I'm expecting most Americans will want to get the vaccine. People will start having a vaccine card. They'll need it to get into movie theaters, restaurants, and potentially even to see me in person. We'll see. Here's my vaccine card that I got from on December 18th. Okay, so this is a really important table here. This is from the FDA that had an advisory committee on immunization practices recommendation for COVID-19 vaccines to persons aged 16 years or greater. And this has phase 1A, which we're in now. Phase 1A is healthcare personnel and long-term nursing care facility residents. There's estimated to be 21 million Americans that are healthcare workers and 3 million Americans that are live in the long-term facility care facilities. Phase 1B is frontline essential workers, and I think there's going to be a controversy: who's a frontline essential worker and who isn't? A teacher, a fireman, a policeman, garbage man, somebody who works in restaurants. It's unclear exactly who are going to be for frontline essential workers. There's 30 million of them. And then the second phase 1B would be persons over grade age 75. There's 21 million of them. Phase 1C, which will go next, is persons age 65 to 74. Patients with age 16 to 64 that are high-risk medical conditions. And this is a huge number of people. So this is estimated to be 110 million people. These are people with obesity, diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease. Question, I'm not that sure, should these people move up above the frontline essential workers? It's unclear to me whether that's true, but right now they're put lower than that. So this is a huge number of people. These will be the people sort of getting it. My guess is the winter and spring time. Then you have 57 million essential workers that are not recommended for vaccine in the phase 1B up here. And then you have phase 2, patients greater than 16 years not recommended, previously recommended, which are the remaining ones. And you can see a couple of people sort of missing from this group here. One is children, and one is pregnant women. So children aged 12 to 15 were studied, but not reported in the studies. Hopefully they'll be reported and they'll get the vaccine. Children under 12 and pregnant women were not studied. It's unclear what's going to happen to those people. What can you do? Continue social distancing and wearing masks until you get the vaccine. Be safe and avoid holiday and New Year's gatherings. I guess we passed over Christmas gatherings by now, but hopefully keep on being safe. And we all have to do our prayers to pray that the pandemic ends. I'm a believer in the power of prayer. Now, I mentioned a little bit on my newsletter that, and some people may have heard this, that Charles Drew University, where I do my research and teach and work at, was supposed to be a study site, and I was very involved in trying to get the study sites. We were supposed to be for two of them. The first one was for Novavax, the second one was for Sanofi. Both of them had manufacturing problems and did not get FDA clearance. The Novavax turned us down anyways for some unclear reason, but we're not going to be involved in these two, at least now. And I'm pretty sure that there's not going to be any more placebo versus vaccine trials going on. I think it's unethical. I think companies think it's unethical. There's possibly that we're going to be a site for a Sanofi trial versus of another drug, like another vaccine, like the Pfizer and Moderna one, probably in February. But I'm not sure this is going to occur. Okay, now we can leave it up to the chat button, and let me try to pull that up. We have a lot of questions, I'm sure. Okay, I'm going to start at the bottom and work up, I think, here. Can you address people with autoimmune disorders and steroids? Again, everybody should get this. Autoimmune disease, steroids, Cushing's, Addison, you should definitely get this. It's probably going to answer most people's questions on that. I don't see any reason why someone shouldn't get it. Somebody who's pregnant right now should not get it at this point. As you said, the CDCs are undecided. Right now, that hasn't been approved. It sounds like to me that somebody's 21 weeks pregnant, the best thing is to wait and deliver. This may change as we get more information on it. But right now, I think everybody is going to get it. Katerina asked, what actually makes us high risk for complications when we get COVID? So people like, for example, with Addison's disease, they have an intrinsic defect in their T cells. So they have some problems fighting off infections. People that have Cushing's, they have the high dose steroids. They have some trouble fighting off infections. Overweight people, there's various reasons why they have trouble fighting off infections. In general, people get the COVID infection similar to other people, but they have more severe questions. Hashimoto's, definitely you should get it. Warren asked, we've been reading news articles about increasing vitamin D levels to enhance immune function against coronavirus. These are not, would these be effective? These are not proven studies. These are sort of correlations. And I don't think that hurts, but I wouldn't recommend that. Will you be able to vaccinate us? No, absolutely not. Where do we get the approved vaccine early? I think people are going to get, should talk about this, people are going to get it through their healthcare system. So people like that are part of Kaiser, or where I work at Department of Health Services, Cedars, I think if you're part of a health system, you'll get it through your health system, and they'll have a lot of it, and they'll probably have a lot of it fairly early, and they'll have their criteria of when you can give it. Now, you can sort of try to be at the top of the line for your bracket. So we showed the different brackets, the 1A, the 1B, all those people within that bracket. If you're the squeaky wheel and you call your primary doctor every couple of days saying, when am I going to get the vaccine? There's a good chance you'll get it more than the quiet person who's still in that same bracket. I don't think you can jump brackets, but I think you could. I think if you made its case, you're going to get it earlier. So again, all the people on the question here, everyone's basically asking the same question. So all the people here are in this group here. Persons age 16 to 64 with high-risk medical conditions. These 110 million Americans. All these are Cushing's, Addison's, Hashimoto's, potentially, probably not Hashimoto's. Cushing's, Addison's, diabetes, obesity, panhypopit patients. They're probably going to be in this category here with 110 million people. So you basically you're going to have to wait your turn, but I'm hoping that's not too long of a turn. And within this group here, talk to your primary doctor, your hospital, and try to get it sooner. I don't think you need to tell a person anything about that here. What if there's an ingredient in the vaccine you're allergic to? Can you get your doctor to assist with that? My guess is, as so far, it looks like there's very few people that have had allergies. And if you do have an allergy, you can probably talk to your primary doctor. Probably I would take a Medrol pack and some antihistamines before that. So Cushing's patients fall into this category 1C. Autoimmune diseases, maybe, again, you're probably going to be in this 1C category here. If we get symptoms of fever, do we have to increase our dose? And this was a talk today on vaccines. So I talked about that in my last webinar. You can look at it online. But if you're really sick, you should increase your dose. If you're not really that sick, you shouldn't. You should, and if you're really sick, you should go to the hospital. But if you're just a little bit sick, I don't think you need to increase your doses here. Which one is the best one? I think the best was whichever one you get. I don't think people are going to have a choice. I think the Pfizer one and the Moderna one are similar, and I think it's going to be whichever system. So Pfizer's going to get some systems. Some of these are going to be distributed like at Walgreens, and there's going to be a small charge to pay for it at Walgreens. Those people are going to probably, especially if you're in a rural area, you're probably going to get the Moderna one. If you're part of a big system that as a hospital has these minus 95 degrees freezers, you're probably going to get the Pfizer one. Well, they continue to work on improving the existing vaccines even as they roll out. So the Pfizer and the Moderna one, I think they're pretty established here. They're already made, they're manufactured, they seem to work pretty well. I don't think they're going to be that much improvement on them. And I've been wrong a lot of times on my predictions on COVID. I admit that. So I originally thought that the vaccines won't be so good, and maybe one would be good for patient A, one would be good for patient B. But it turned out that they seem very good for everybody. So I don't think they're going to tweak them or anything like that. They may decide you get a third vaccine. Some people may get a third vaccine, third booster shot. But I think they're going to be pretty good. I think the purpose right now is to get as many people as possible to take it here. And I think rarely should people take additional steroids pre-vaccine. I think just somebody that has an allergic, severe allergy is the only ones that possibly need to take it here. Vaccines for women with endocrine issues planning to have more children. Any effects on fertility? I don't think there's any effects on fertility. I think you should not take it if you're pregnant. But you should, if you're just planning on getting pregnant, I think you should go ahead and take it for sure. People says, where's the recordings available? I'll post it on my website in a couple of days, hopefully early this coming week. Let's go up to the top here one now. Let's see if we can find that. Hello from Miami Beach. Good evening. Thank you, everybody. I would like to know if you get the COVID vaccine, can you test positive for COVID with a rapid test? No. So the COVID vaccine does not have the RNA, the DNA that tests in a PCR test or an antigen test. So you won't test positive in an antigen test or a PCR test. You will test positive for the antibody test. Hashimoto's, I don't think is really going to be that much of a risk factor here. People with Hashimoto's don't get more infections. It's probably not going to be, you're probably going to be a regular patient. If you have an allergic reaction, one epinephrine injection also lower your blood pressure. For anaphylaxis, epinephrine and steroids. I think you should talk to your doctor about it. I think it's very hard to generalize what's going to happen with this. I think if you have an allergic reaction to the first one, then you might have it. And I think the important thing also to remember, people who had allergic reaction, they were fine basically within a couple hours. Some of them got steroids, still better than getting COVID to have a reaction to those very low numbers here. Do you support vaccines in general for people with endocrine disorders? Yes, I support. I think in general people should get vaccines, help fight off infections. Moderna is 2 doses and Pfizer is 2 doses also. What studies have been done in long-term effects from taking a vaccine? How do we feel comfortable with this vaccine? So as I mentioned, the studies that come out have been 2 months after the 2 months after the second dose, as far as I can tell, on average. So some people got more, some people got less. So it's not a huge effect, but there hasn't been any really studies after that first time they got their shot in their shoulder. That was when people got all the reactions. So it looks quite safe, but I agree that people should, they should continue the studies. But I feel very confident that this is a safe vaccine and people aren't going to drop dead a year from now or something like that. I think this basically makes the antibodies, and then both the DNA, the RNA that's injected, and the protein that's coded goes away, and I think people will be quite safer than other types of vaccines that we're using now. How do people with pituitary deficiency do with COVID from your experience? I've had at the beginning, I had one patient with pretty severe COVID who had a pituitary condition. Now, I'm even having I had an appointment with somebody this week that had COVID. She was having an appointment with me, so she was fine. My county patients is a very large number of people are having COVID. Some of them are very sick, and some get hospitalized and recover, and some are fairly mild. I think again, COVID is very serious. What is the website for side effects? I think you can look at the CDC. You can look in the New England Journal article. What is the rapid Abbott test ID now considered? It's not PCR. It's an antigen test. It doesn't pick up RNA. It picks up the protein. 3 people have taken the vaccine and came back positive with the rapid test. Now, to explain this, not really. I need to look at what the literature, what happened with these people, but the immunity doesn't develop for 12 days afterwards. So potentially people can still get sick, and then it increases a little bit more. So potentially people can get infected within 12 days after the infection, and potentially even a few people can get it before they get their second injection. I think it will be safe in people with mitochondrial disorders. Yes. A small percentage of people that did not find the vaccine effective. Did the vaccine lessen the symptoms? That's a very good question. Yes. So there was 8 people that got infected, but only one of them got severe. So it seems like from what I've read, the people that got it were very mild cases. So it seems to not only prevent people from getting infected, but preventing the severity. And it seems like that would also prevent people from having being infectious. Well, let me see if people have raised their hand. Things find that. No, I don't think so. Let's see if there's anything else here. If first dose is 91% effective, we need the second dose. I'd say yes. Campbell and Dr. Hassan asked. The first dose, I don't think it's really shown that it's 91% effective because everybody got the second dose. So you need to see, what happens if you can design a study with just one dose, but I don't think so. I think this is really what's going to be by now. I think, I think we're into the phase out, and this is what's accepted. So I think people are going to get 2 doses. It will work fairly well, okay. But why should you not get complete immunity if you can? Would someone with Sjogren's get the earlier groups? Yes, someone with Sjogren's would probably multiple myeloma. Would those people would get in that earlier phase of people with other medical illnesses, along with the other 110 million Americans with that. People haven't asked about out of the United States. I think it's a fascinating question. How are other countries going to get this? Is the United States going to be vaccinating Americans first, and then leftover ones are going to go to other countries? I haven't really heard that much about it. I think for the vaccine to be wiped out, you need to have the whole world vaccinated. And, we're talking about 7 billion people with 2 doses. So it's a lot of vaccines. And I think Again, I think it's these two are going to be the main ones, so we really need to crank up efficiency to try to get it throughout the world. Can you get one Pfizer and one the second one Moderna? The answer is no. They recommend, and I think they're going to enforce this. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. If you start with a Pfizer, you get a Pfizer. If you start with a Moderna, you're going to get a Moderna. If you had COVID and recovered, should you get the vaccine too? Yes. So people, the immunity can wane after the infection. It sort of depends on how serious your infection is. But I think it's definitely recommended to get the vaccine if you got infected. Do you recommend the vaccine for healthy mothers breastfeeding? That I'm not really sure. That's a good question. I don't think that's been examined. I think it would make sense that you can get it, but I don't think that's been tested. So I missed some questions. If anybody wants to ask them again, if it's we haven't really asked them. 3 different strains of COVID have appeared. Has this occurred after the vaccination or pre-vaccination? Yes, they've occurred before the vaccinations. The different strains, and as I mentioned before, I don't think there's going to be a strain that it's not the vaccines don't work against. That's slightly possible, but I think because they're against the spike protein, which is the main immunogenic area, even though there's some changes, I think the immunogenicity is going to continue. For Cushing's folks, is there anything we should tell the hospital when should we end up with a respirator? I don't think so. I think I think you can just tell people you have Cushing's, and I think you'll be treated basically the same. There is dexamethasone is given for severe COVID. You can get the dexamethasone. I think will probably be okay. If we have side effects of the vaccines, you recommend updosing the dose. I mean, I think your side effects are going to be in the first day or so, first couple of days. I don't think you need to updose your dose, your steroids. Can we show this presentation to our doctor? Sure, no problem. I think the vaccine will be effective against these new strains. How is monitoring sustainable immunity done? So in the study, they're going to look at people's antibody levels. Clinically, the antibody testing, which again I predicted correctly on, I thought the antibody testing would be a game changer. Really hasn't been that. It's not that accurate. So I don't think it's going to be done clinically on people. I think they're going to just get these 2 vaccines and presume they're immune. But I think they're going to be in the study. You're going to see that how long it's going to go, what happens to the antibody levels in people in the study, and presumably if people's antibody levels stay high in the study, then we're going to assume that the rest of Americans are going to be safe to keep to keep your immunity up after the 2 vaccines. If it starts looking like the immunity starts declining or declining among a certain group or something like that, then I think they're going to recommend a booster shot. What age health conditions exist in the pre-vaccine studies? I think you mean the vaccine studies. The pre-vaccine studies were mice or something like that. But in the vaccine studies, it was all ages, all genders, all health conditions. There was a lot of people with concurrent disease. The older people did just as well as the younger people. The males did basically just as well as the females, and the people with pre-existing conditions did just as well as non-pre-existing conditions. Maybe slightly, not statistically significant, but potentially better. If you're an immunosuppressant like Tate, is it safe to get the vaccine? Yes, absolutely. And you should maybe even more so get it, but I think everybody should get it. Again, this is different from getting like a attenuated virus like the original polio virus. You're not getting anything that can give you COVID from the vaccine. Final question. So let me again put up the, what is this? So again, you can go on my website, goodhormonehealth.com. The webinar will be posted there. If you want an appointment, please do not hesitate to schedule an appointment on the website or email us. Late 80s parents to get the vaccine, absolutely. I think the older people should definitely get it. No problem. Thanks a bunch. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you guys later. Again, sorry for the audio problem in the beginning, but it should have worked out okay on the recording, so I think people can hear that. And let me try to, while people are logging out, let me try to share this one here.
Has shown the more than 7 billion people who inhabit our world that there is light at the end of what has been a very dark tunnel. That is why we are honored to have Albert, the proud son of Holocaust survivors, light the seventh candle.
Shalom, everyone. I want to thank Ambassador Dermer for inviting me to virtually light the Israeli embassy's.
Let me start at the beginning here.
Of the over 50,000 Jews who lived in Saloniki, Greece on the eve of the Holocaust, only a few thousand survived, including Dr. Albert Bourla's parents. 75 years after the Nazis murdered millions, Dr. Bourla is today leading the race to save millions. He is the CEO of the Pfizer Corporation, which has developed the world's first COVID-19 vaccine. In the months ahead, hundreds of millions of doses of the vaccine will be distributed to countries throughout the world, including to Israel. Under his leadership, Pfizer has shown the more than 7 billion people who inhabit our world that there is light at the end of what has been a very dark tunnel. That is why we are honored to have Albert, the proud son of Holocaust survivors, light the seventh candle.
Shalom, everyone. I want to thank Ambassador Dermer for inviting me to virtually light the Israeli embassy's candle for the seventh night of Hanukkah. For me, it is a great honor. Hanukkah is the story of two things. First, it is a story of grit and determination in the face of great adversity. Following the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, a small army of Maccabees fought back and eventually rebuilt the temple. Second, it is a story of the impossible becoming possible. That's because after the temple was destroyed, there was only enough oil left to keep a candle burning for only one night, only one day. Yet it lasted for 8. This Hanukkah, as this extremely difficult year comes to a close and we look to a new beginning, we are celebrating both. The incredible human spirit and determination it took to create a COVID-19 vaccine, and how these efforts made the impossible, developing the vaccine so quickly, possible. So, As I light the candle for the seventh night of Hanukkah, I give thanks to the men and women who worked day and night over the past 9 months and whose efforts have brought a shining light to our world. And I give thanks to God for guiding our efforts and helping us deliver during this season of joy and renewal, a gift for the whole world. I wish you all and your loved ones a happy Hanukkah and a 2021 filled with many blessings. Stay safe and stay well.
Okay, thanks everybody.